I guess I should ask the question, how do I describe my moral injury? How do I explain my road to repentance? And how do I put the narrative together in order to articulate accurately to the people in this room and the people that will watch this later what is important to think about from a Marine's perspective about a moral conscience in war? I was not a conscientious objector. I finished my service. In 2004, I was honorably discharged. My story's a lot like Josh's. I grew up in a conservative Christian home. My dad was a small business owner, very Republican. I have a litmus test of a family that served in the military. All of my grandparents, World War II, uncles and aunts, and the first Gulf War. And we love the American tradition in my family. We cry every time we hear the national anthem, and still today I do. So when I was in high school, I was at an Ivy Prep, all boys, high school, very studious. And as most of my classmates went off to Yale and Stanford, I decided I was going to do something different, follow my family's tradition. And I was going to go and enlist in the Marines. Why the Marines? I don't know. I guess I like the uniform. But see, this is 2000, so we had been at peace for a long time, and I thought this was probably a safe move. I probably wouldn't go to war, but if I was prepared to defend my country just in case. 9/11 hits, Operation Enduring Freedom. About 45 minutes after the first plane crashed in the towers, my platoon sergeant came upstairs and said, "Hey guys, this is what we trained for. We're getting ready to deploy." And then within a few days, we were on ships headed towards the Middle East. And in 2001, we were the first boots on the ground in Pakistan and Afghanistan. In 2003, I also was first boots on the ground in Iraq. But see, that's not where the story starts. That's probably where a lot of people here would like it to start, but that's not where it starts. It really starts in 2005. See, I got out of the Marines in 2004, and I entered college. And while I was in college, I, for the first time, heard things differently. And I heard things differently because my own narrative after my service in the military was that the war was essential and that any actions that took place were sensible and justified. They were not to be questioned, not only my actions, but the orders given by the former President Bush and Vice President Cheney, and on and on and on. This was the story that was on in my head. My thought pattern developed that way because that is how we dealt with the trauma of war. We locked ourselves into a grid that said it must have been justified, or else there was something wrong with what I did, and that was too hard to bear. In Iraq, my job was Mobile Security Task Force. So I did security patrols, transport security, population surveillance. And during the invasion, it's a lot different than any of the war that took place after that, because during the invasion, the rules of engagement were much different. We had strict parameters to identify an enemy because they weren't wearing uniforms, and those strict parameters were guarded. And they included people with boots, anyone who passed and who posed an obstruction to convoys, or someone who posed a threat which any reasonable person would recognize. During the invasion, there was a few things that didn't make sense to me. Because I saw a lot of people with boots, but they didn't have weapons. And there was a lot of people getting in the way of traffic. And I want to tell you about the 3 forms of injury that I endured while I was in Iraq. The misuse of power, senseless violence, and political confusion. First start with misuse of power was, as we were doing patrols, if we saw people, this was in the very early days of the invasion, if we saw people that held weapons, we were supposed to eliminate them. We were supposed to eliminate them because they posed an imminent threat to the mission of the United States. Now, a lot of times we didn't see anybody with weapons, but there was one time we did. It's within the first week or 2 of the invasion. And George was our chalk leader. It's a Humvee leader. George was taking first patrol, and he had in control of the gun up top, and me and Doors were in the vehicle. And as we were driving by an MSR Tampa heading up towards Nazaria, we passed by a small village, and there were some men that were running to the streets, or running to the berm, and as they headed up, they had something in their hand. I don't know what it was. But all I heard was contact left, contact left, contact left. And I didn't fire because George beat me to it. And I saw the pink mist come out of the soldier, come out of the individual. And I saw the man drop. And then I saw a family come out screaming. And George lost it. George vomited and passed out, dropped in the Humvee, and Doris tells me, get up top. So I go up and grab the gun, .240 Golf, and again, contact left, and I roll over, put the machine gun in place, but I couldn't fire. I froze. And I froze because I didn't see it in the rules of engagement that I was supposed to do it. But later that day, when we went back, we filled out the after-action report, and they sent intel out there to find out what happened, and sure enough, there was some Iraqi army paraphernalia in the village, and so they sort of justified and said this guy was in part of the Iraqi army. But the thing that hit me was George grabbed some of the rounds and sort of stacked them by his bunk and said, yep, this is where, these are my bullets. This is the ones that got him. And I didn't know what to think about it. So I went to our platoon commander and I said, listen, I need to get a new vehicle because this doesn't make any sense to me anymore. I got a new vehicle. We're doing more patrols. And remember I said that if there's anybody that got in the way of the vehicles, we were supposed to run them down because that's how they posed a threat. You didn't know if they were going to be bombers. You didn't know if they were going to be suicide bombers, whatever. As we're going through some of these small towns, there's a bunch of kids running around, playing soccer, whatnot. And so one time, I was in the middle vehicle, so I didn't quite see what happened, but I heard it. And I heard a little kid get squashed. Now, 2005, what happens? I'm in a movie theater and I'm watching a commercial, and it's an Army recruiting commercial, and I see the commercial have kids run out in the streets, and then the vehicle, as it's coming up, does an emergency stop as the kids are running in the middle of the street in this recruiting commercial. The soldier gets out, picks up the ball, and hands it to the kids. And the recruiting commercial said, be all you can be. Now that might have been the new rules of engagement, but when I was there, that wasn't the case. And so there was a mythic story that was being told to the American people about what was taking place in war.